Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Western North Carolina AIDS Project's commemoration of World AIDS Day. This is our World AIDS Day Candlelight Memorial Vigil. My name's Pam Siekman, and I'm the chair of the WNCAP board, and I'm really glad that you came out tonight to be here with us. We've been here all week. We've had our exhibit here all week long, surrounded by these incredible woven memories. We've had a lot of people here this week, a lot of stories, met a lot of new people. People come in by themselves and look around, and some people come in with loved ones and look around and tell their stories. But I'd like to just start this evening with a moment of silence. And I'd like us all to just kind of take a deep breath and during that moment of silence, look around the room and honor the 160 souls that are represented on these beautiful panels. Take a moment. You know, they're sown with love, with tears, with laughter, with so much heart. I know that some of you here have made a panel before, so you know what that's like. So today is World AIDS Day. All around the world, people are gathering in Beijing, China, in Sydney, Australia. I don't know if you saw some of the pictures around the internet today. The Opera House in Sydney is glowing bright red today. The Empire State Building is all lit in red. The Eiffel Tower is lit in red, part of the Red campaign, which is also part of the One campaign to help end AIDS and global poverty. And I saw this in the paper this morning. This was in the New York Times. Some of you may have seen things like this, but this caught my attention. I liked it. It says, "Every day is World AIDS Day" by MAC Makeup. Yay, we want to support our companies that support our causes. Starbucks today was donating $3 on their large drinks to World AIDS funds all across the country, which was wonderful. Yay, Starbucks, thank you. And then here we are. Here we are. I need my notes for this, you guys. I'm really sorry. So we've been here all week, and I've had a chance to meet a lot of people, as I mentioned. And one of the things that kept coming up is, how old is World AIDS Day? Well, this is the 24th World AIDS Day. World AIDS Day is 24 years old. And that kind of got me thinking that I lost my first friend to AIDS 22 years ago. Wow. And he was a colleague, a work colleague. His name was Sam Beck. We worked together at Digital Equipment Corporation in Atlanta. And then in 1992, I lost another very dear friend, my friend Mark Pexton, who's honored on a panel up here. I'm glad to have him here with me tonight. So the 80s and the 90s were such difficult years to lose people. You know, World AIDS Day today and World AIDS Day 24 years ago are very different. I see a lot of you are nodding your heads. Can I just ask a question? How many of you lost somebody or knew somebody in those 80s and 90s time frame? Okay, everybody look around for a second. Keep your hands up. Okay, so those of you with your hands up, you know, this was before the cocktail. This was before the meds improved. You know, thinking about this, so we lost like you did, I watched my friends suffer and struggle through a tragedy, through the fight of their life. And people ask me, and this week I've been asked, why do we keep doing this? And it's like, I go inside of myself and I think about that, and because I was there, just like you were there that raised your hands, we held their hands, we fed them, we held them, we rubbed lotion on their feet because the neuropathy was so bad. We did all of that. And that burned an impression in our hearts and in our minds that we will never forget. And I would guess that many of you that are like me, we vowed, we told them, I will never forget you. And I will never forget what you went through. And that's one of the reasons that we're here. So think about this, 24 years ago, 22 years ago, however long it was, when we were going through that, babies were being born. And now this new generation of, World AIDS Day is 24 years old. We, WinCap, we have clients that are 24 years old. There's this generation, and they don't know what we went through. I know, so this is a message for everybody that raised their hand, and for everybody, but we went through that. And it was hard, and it's hard to look back, and I know it's painful to look back, and I know sometimes you just don't want to go there. But we need to go there. And we need to tell those stories. Because those babies that were born when we were going through all of that, they're 24, 25, 26 years old right now. And they need to hear this message. They need to know where AIDS came from. It's just like I talk to young girls that don't understand the women's movement, right? They don't understand the road that we traveled, and you have to explain it to them. This is the same thing. I know it's painful to think of those memories and to go back and relive those days, but we have to. I'm hoping that tonight, those of you that do remember that you'll find a way to use your voice, that you'll find a way to stand up, that you'll find a way to tell your story to a young person today. Because you just may save a life. That's what World AIDS Day is about today. President Obama talks about a generation without AIDS when he talked about the new national AIDS strategy. Well, you know what? If the generation without AIDS is coming in the future, and we can kind of see that, guess what that makes us? We are the AIDS generation. We are. It's ours. And we need to tell those stories to these young people so that we can reach that generation without AIDS. I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding up and down, so I want you all to contact me if you're nodding those heads. And we have an advocacy person at WinCap. We will teach you how to use your voice. We will teach you how to get out there and educate. We will help you. We will help you with your story, and we'll help you package that story. But we need it to be told. So that's what we're doing here. And that's why we gather every year, because the stories have to be told. And tonight we're going to tell some. We're going to tell some stories. We're going to receive 2 new quilt panels that will be inducted to the National AIDS Memorial Quilt. But first, and then we're going to light some candles. And right now I'm going to light a candle. And I'm going to light a candle of hope. Hope for the day when the AIDS pandemic is over. The day when people infected with HIV will live productive and healthy lives. The day when babies aren't born with HIV. A day when individuals are educated and take personal responsibility for their lives and choices. I light this candle for the day when support organizations such as WinCap are no longer necessary. May this candle of hope shine in our hearts and inspire our actions long after this evening is over. I'd like to invite Jeff Bahar, WinCap's Executive Director, to the stage.
So I'm Jeff Bahar, and I'm the Executive Director of WinCap, and it's an honor to be the Executive Director. I have my notes here. I'm not checking my email while I'm talking to you. I just want to give you a sense of HIV and AIDS in Western North Carolina and the things that WinCap does currently, surrounded by so many powerful memories of the past that inform what we do today. If you were to have been shopping at Walmart, the one down a couple miles from here, a few months ago, you might have seen a gentleman pull into the parking lot and get out of his car and walk into the store and walk past the housewares and then the big screen TVs and stuff and the toys and things, and go into the restroom and use the bathroom and brush his teeth and come back out, and he walked back to his car, and you would have seen him get into his car, but he didn't get back into the driver's seat. He got into the back seat and shut the door and pulled a blanket over himself and went to sleep. And that was his home. And then he got up in the morning and he used the Walmart bathroom to get cleaned up and brush his teeth and start the day. And he came to the WinCap office and used the phone. His case manager had been able to get him into a housing program, a housing voucher, and he was actually doing the legwork of finding himself the right place to live so he could use that voucher. He was taking the initiative to do that on his own. And housing is healthcare for us. If our clients have stable housing, they have a safe place to put their medicines. It's easier to arrange transportation so that they can get to their medical appointments on a regular basis. And then their viral load starts to go down, and their health improves overall. They're not transmitting the virus, are not as likely to other people. And so that's good, effective case management. He's able now to focus on living and not just focus on surviving. And that type of thing we see repeated over and over again many times throughout the year at WinCap. Since January, we have taken in approximately 95 new clients. 95 new clients. This surprises people. It's a mix of people who may have acquired their infection in the region and people moving here. But nonetheless, it's a high volume of cases. We've been able to, with the support of the community and our fundraising efforts, able to hire a new case manager and a case management assistant to help ease that load. But it's a high volume still, and we're working towards getting more people on staff to reduce the burden on each case manager. Our advocacy efforts are going quite strong, led by Peggy Wheel. We recently were part of a statewide effort to get the AIDS Drug Assistance Program waiting list removed. And that took leadership from WinCap, from the North Carolina AIDS Action Network, and a variety of other organizations across the state. People like you making phone calls and writing letters, and it works. So we should all be very proud of the work that you have done, and there's a lot more to go. Now we're focusing our sights on Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion is incredibly important for people living with HIV and AIDS and others. So we'll look to you to give us a call and become engaged in that battle as well. And we can be successful once again. So, the recent data just released on Tuesday from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention showed that the highest rates of new HIV cases are in people ages 13 to 24. Okay, just to be clear, that's ages 13 to 24. Kind of what Pam was saying is that this should be incredibly concerning to us all. And that was national data, but North Carolina is seeing the same situation. That's based on data the state of North Carolina hasn't yet released publicly, and I guess I just did that for them. But they didn't say I couldn't. So, you know, our prevention programs are strong, but they're not nearly as widespread throughout our 18-county region as they need to be. So we are going to try to find the resources to get more staff and expand those programs. That's critical especially in light of this new data out of CDC about HIV in youth. So, just the other day, a WNCAP educator was out in one of our more rural areas, and he was conducting a small group session. He had finished up a testing event. That's one of the things we're trying to do more and more is do more testing for HIV. Rapid testing can happen in a half hour with an oral swab without blood being drawn, and get those tests done in a variety of places, not just at health departments, but in other venues. And this WNCAP educator had finished one of those and was working with a small group of people, and he was talking to them using an evidence-based and reality-based curriculum around sex, HIV transmission, being straight, being gay, what's a healthy relationship and what isn't. And he was able to make a connection to a young man in that crowd who, in this very small town, was struggling with his own sexuality. And for the first time, this WNCAP educator was somebody that this young man could relate to, and he felt very comfortable and approached the educator, and the WNCAP educator has been able to follow up with him and provide him the support that he needs. So that when we're out there, when our educators are out there in the 18 counties, it's more than just the nuts and bolts of HIV. It's far more than that. And those types of interactions and connections take place. They can take place in English at an after-school program, or in Spanish at a migrant labor camp, and in many, many other places. So we've got a huge amount of work to do. More and more HIV is becoming a disease of poverty. Not exclusively, of course, but there's a very strong link. And for us to turn this epidemic around, we have to focus much of our efforts on interventions that are further upstream, that help address poverty, that help address young mothers as they're dealing with a lot of situations. They may be a single mom in a poor neighborhood, and being a part of larger interventions that address these larger issues is critical. And you're going to see WNCAP kind of being a catalyst to start some of those interventions in the region in the future. So we've got a great deal of activities going on. We can use your support, we can use your donations, but we can use also your ideas and your time, your volunteer time. There's a huge amount of volunteer activities we can get you engaged in. So please get in touch with us and share all your creativity and your energy. I've been in my role as executive director at WNCAP a year and a half or so, a little over a year. And I can't tell you how proud I am of every single WNCAP employee. It's amazing what they do. It's a difficult job, but they do it so well. And I'm incredibly proud of each and every one of them. One of the things that makes it so difficult is that sometimes clients die still. And we lost 9 clients. And so I'd like to ask the case managers that are here to come on up. And we're going to do a candlelighting ceremony in honor of those clients.
Charles Lee H. Harry H. Ernest G. Eric Dwayne R. Paula C. Will L. Jim G. Walt D. And Gary C.
and I'm going to be lighting a candle in honor of all the case managers and all the WinCap staff and all the doctors and nurses and volunteers and social workers and health promoters and caregivers, researchers and community activists, and all the ordinary citizens around the world who give of themselves sacrificially and courageously in the daily battle against HIV and AIDS. May their energies be replenished, may their numbers be extended, and may their efforts be effective in curbing the spread of AIDS and alleviating the suffering of so many.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ken Patterson. I'm the Global Grassroots Manager for an organization called Results. We are a citizen advocacy organization, and we have chapters all over the United States. Ordinary people like you and I who are educating their members of Congress about the issue of AIDS around the world and generating the political will to make sure that we actually move towards the AIDS-free generation that Pam talked about at the opening here. I want to light a candle for the African AIDS crisis, and then I want to share a personal message from a woman from Africa whose life has been saved because of the generosity of people like you and I. So I light this candle for the over 20 million men, women, and children of Africa who have died from AIDS, and for the 23 million more who are currently living with HIV on that continent. I light this candle also for the 16 million children who have been orphaned as a result of AIDS. May we all stand up and use our voices to ensure that the global resources be committed to protecting life, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, the region of the world where AIDS has taken its greatest toll. May the era of widows and AIDS orphans be ended because we stood up for them. Let this be our legacy. So what does it feel like to save a life? Let me share with you a message from a woman named Linda Mafu. She's from Zambia. She now works for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. She wants to thank the people who are in this room, you, for saving her life and the lives of many others. Here's what Linda sent out yesterday to me. On this day called the World AIDS Day, I'm celebrating people's lives. During the period from 1989 to 2007, I had to dress up for funerals nearly daily because my friends and family members were dying. We cried, looked for people to blame. We felt guilty about not doing enough. When a person tested positive for HIV, he or she was told to go home and write up a will so that they could die in peace. We had no hope that we would ever defeat this disease. Family ties were broken. Families became poor because their breadwinners were sick and dying. Families became poor because the money that they had to be spent on treatment, transportation, and hospital charges. Then we got support from ordinary citizens all over the world, including you. We were first supported to learn about the disease. Just learning that it was a manageable disease gave us hope. Then you campaigned for support to stop the pandemic, and we felt that someone heard us in our little corner of the world. That helped us to galvanize more public support in our own country. When the Global Fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, which US taxpayers support, when they helped us roll out treatment in our country, we celebrated. We have moved from having 0 people on treatment in 1989 to 1.8 million people on treatment today. People are taking their treatment. They are back in their workplaces. They are supporting their families, and they are living dignified lives. You may not be able to see those faces, but they are aware of the impact of your work in their lives. Thank you for your continued support. We are almost there now, so don't let go. Not now. We now celebrate people's lives. 1.8 million people are alive as a result of ordinary people doing extraordinary things to give us hope. I really thank you for that. On World AIDS Day, I still mourn my losses, but I celebrate people who are alive. I celebrate because of the work that you are doing. So thank you, all of you. You know, there's still a lot of work to be done in Africa and other parts of the developing world. But we can actually make it our legacy to drive AIDS into the dirt forever. It will take creating political will. Right now, half of the people around the planet who need AIDS drugs actually are receiving them. That's a huge advancement, but that's only half the people who need them. New research has us moving in the right direction. If we treat people who are HIV positive early, we can significantly reduce the chances they're going to transmit the disease. We don't have a cure yet, but we have some really darn good tools. And if we put them into place, we can actually end this pandemic. But we're not going to do it by allowing government decision makers to make decisions on their own. It's going to require our voices as well. I want to invite all of you to join Results and WinCap on Monday evening at 7 p.m. at the Carolina Cinemas for a showing of How to Survive a Plague. How to Survive a Plague is a fantastic award-winning documentary that tells the American story of the early days of the AIDS crisis. And it was only by bold voices, bold actions, that we are where we are today. Activists who are watching people die around them when there was no solution, stepping forward to their decision makers, to scientists, to researchers, and telling them to accelerate progress on this disease until they came up with a combination therapy that we're actually using today. We have a lot to learn from them. They can inspire us by what they did, the courage that they had, and also the actions that they took. So please join us on Monday at 7 p.m. at the Carolina Cinemas for a viewing of that film and a discussion afterwards where we can all talk about what all of us can do to actually take us closer to the end of AIDS. I hope to see you there.
Hi, I'm Peggy Wheel. I'm the advocacy coordinator at WinCap. And I'm up here with Jennifer Poor, one of our vibrant SISTA facilitators and volunteer. And I also have her grandchildren, Anthony and Asia, and these are my children, Ava and Alex. And I am here, and I do the work that I do because I am inspired by the strength and the beauty that I see in the people living with HIV and AIDS every day. But I'm also here because I'm a mother, and I grew up and I came of age when AIDS was at the beginning of the crisis. So I remember this, and I don't see that we remember it like we used to. And I want all the children now to know that they have a future without AIDS, and that I hope that someday they won't have this disease anymore. So we are here to light a candle in honor of and memory of the children infected with AIDS, for the 2.5 million children living with HIV worldwide, and for the 1,000 babies that are born each day with HIV, 1/2 which will die before their second birthday. May we continue to increase our education and medical advancements to stop the spread of HIV from mother to child. For the children here and abroad, may prevention efforts be doubled, may the resources to sustain life be appropriated, and may Earth's little ones find healing and joy. May we all work together to keep a baby alive.
this summer, my husband and I and some members of the WNCAP staff were in Washington, D.C. WNCAP staff members attending the World AIDS Conference in July in Washington, which was wonderful for them. And others of us were working at the AIDS Memorial Quilt exhibit. They brought the quilt panels back to Washington, D.C. And they were spread out. You know that the quilt is too big now to be shown as once, as it was in '92. Some of you were there. So it was all over Washington. It was in front of all of the monuments. It was at the National Cathedral, and it was just everywhere. And it was incredible. It was 103 degrees, but it was really a special time to be. And one of the things that I had the honor to do is something I've wanted to do ever since I started this work, was to be able to stand on the stage in Washington, D.C. and to read names, participate in the reading of the names. And I think that's something, there's certain things in your life that you'll remember forever. And that was one of them for me, standing there and seeing the Washington Monument in the distance and seeing a sea of AIDS quilts in front of me and seeing people walking around, some kneeling on bended knees with tears in their eyes, and others just connecting with people and telling their stories. And I got to call out my names. I got to read the names that they asked me to read, but then I could say Mark Paxton, and I could say Nick Hoopus, and I read names for my other friends, and I can't tell you what that experience was like. The quilt has been an inspiration for music, for poetry, for countless stories and articles. And one of my favorite songs, and I know many of you know this song, and this song was written by a woman in Washington, D.C. after she saw the quilt exhibit, and it's called A Patchwork Quilt. And we are so fortunate tonight that we have one of Asheville's treasures here with us, Cat Williams, to perform that song. While she sings that, some of you know there's a place in that song where she'll say, "And they called out your name." Call out your names. Let's say our names.
Thank you. I'm truly honored to be here this evening. They unfolded your lives one by one. They laid out your patchwork under the sun. And people gathered from miles around to witness your quilt laid on the ground. And they called out your names, and they called out your names. Oh, you will live forever, because I'll be loving you like a patchwork quilt. Well, there were men and women and mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers and daughters and sons, and children and babies and lovers and friends. They lay all before me, sewn into one. And they call out your name, and they call out your name. Oh, you will live forever, because I'll be loving you just like a patchwork quilt. Your lies had meaning, your lies had joy. You touched so many people, more than you will know. And you wrap yourself around me as I walk through the roads. You're letting me feel your beautiful souls. I feel the warmth of your lies. I feel the warmth of your lies. Oh, you will live forever, because I'll be loving you just like a patchwork quilt. My heart will spill over, flowing with tears. I cried for your suffering, for your shortened years. And I'll take you away with me, I'll walk away with you, remembering you who have died with AIDS. I remember your name. I remember your names. I remember your names. I remember your names. Because I'll be loving you. I'll be loving you. I'll be loving you. Just like a patchwork quilt.
Thank you, Kat. That was beautiful. Good evening. My name is Mark Collins. I'm a proud member of the Western North Carolina AIDS Project Board of Directors. It's a privilege and an honor to be here, for me to be part of this very important vigil marking World AIDS Day and this beautiful and moving display of the AIDS Memorial Quilt. The 48,000 hand-sewn panels of the quilt are a tangible demonstration of love and loss, life and determination. The quilt transforms statistics into souls, stigma into understanding, and complacency into action. The quilt lends voice and volume to the over 94,000 people whose names are lovingly memorialized in panels sewn with love, care, tears, and remembrance. This extraordinary living national treasure stands as a testimony to those we have lost and those 1.2 million people living with HIV/AIDS in this country alone. Yet behind these cold statistics, there are faces and stories sharing history, life, and legacies. The faces on the quilt, there are husbands, our wives, our partners. There are fathers, our mothers, our brothers, our sisters. There are aunts, our uncles, grandparents, daughters, sons, neighbors. There are doctors, our ministers, our best friends, our co-workers. There are loved ones. And after the tears that are shed for them subside, they are celebrated with these treasured bits and pieces that make up all of our lives. Touchstones to who the people behind the panels really are. Adorned with mementos and poems, photographs and monograms, favorite t-shirts, playbills, airline tickets, the symbols of life's being led before ending much too soon. These are the stories and lives that together make up the world's largest living work of folk art. In 1988, a lone panel was delivered quietly to the Names Project in Atlanta. Unlike any other panel among the tens of thousands of panels made at that time, this special panel arrived simply with a handwritten note that said, "I hope this quilt will find a permanent place and help mark the end of this devastating disease. The panel itself was stark in design. White letters on a black background simply stating, "The last one." In the decades since this panel was delivered, it has been held on to with hopeful anticipation that we will one day reach the last one. This very special panel was publicly introduced for the first time on the National Mall this past summer during the opening ceremony of the AIDS Memorial Quilt. The quilt was on display in its entirety throughout Washington, D.C. during the International AIDS Conference 2012. The panel was introduced with heavy hearts, with hopeful hearts, but we still can't yet stitch it into the quilt. Not until we see the last new infection, the last AIDS case, the last death from AIDS, the last one left orphaned, the last person to face discrimination for living with HIV. Every one of us can help induct the last one to the quilt by playing a part in educating, helping to prevent infection, being an advocate, volunteering, and donating. We can help keep hope alive. I implore you to be part of the very last panel as we stitch together a final chapter, knowing that our work and the work of so many throughout the country, throughout the world, was not in vain. Knowing that the beautiful souls that surround us tonight are respected, remembered, and loved. Knowing that in this land of plenty, we must not let anyone ever turn a blind eye to those in need in the future. Thank you. At this point in our program, we're going to induct two very special panels this evening. These panels, one was made this year, and one was made 18 years ago. Both of these panels will be inducted this evening, and they will be added to the quilt as a whole. To close this part, this induction, I can't help but reflect on the lives of these two beautiful people, Kenny and Jan, represented by the panels being inducted into the quilt. Mark and Steve, thank you for sharing such a treasured moment. And please know, through the quilt, they live on as a symbol of eternal hope. They represent a great passage of time, a great passage of time, a changing world, a more aware world. They represent to me hope and love in the knowledge we will see a day in the not too distant future that will see an end to HIV/AIDS. I'm going to light a candle. I'm going to light a candle for the urban poor, young and old, gay and straight, who in the midst of this great country go without the medication, the treatment, and the knowledge that could prevent the spread of AIDS and profoundly sustain life. While we remember those already affected, let us recommit ourselves to more aggressive prevention. access to treatment for everyone, and for removing, once and for all, the stigma associated with this disease.
So this is part of the night where one of the ways that we keep those memories alive by what we've been talking about tonight is by telling stories, by kind of taking a deep breath. Sometimes we have fun stories, the way we remember people. And so I'd like to actually have somebody that's going to start us off. Sorry, Harry, you're second. I'm going to invite Teddy Siegel to the stage, who has a special story that she wants to tell us tonight.
Good evening. My name is Teddy Siegel. 25 years ago, May and November, I lost 2 sons to AIDS. I would like to invite my living son, David, to come forward and share a little bit of history with me. Scott and Doug came into my life when they were 12 and 13 years old. I'd married their father. He was a parent with 3 children. I married him, and I remember the first summer that I had them, and he was at work, and he left me at home taking care of them, and they got into a fight, and all I knew about, they were hemophiliacs, was if they bruised themselves, they would hemorrhage. So they're out in the yard beating up on one another. I said, oh my God, what do I do? I called up their father and said, come home right now. These kids are beating up on one another. I don't know what to do. Anyway, they were the most wonderful part of my life that I will always remember, because they brought to me so much knowledge of what it was to be living. They took their hemophilia as if it was an everyday occurrence. We just spent Thanksgiving with my oldest granddaughter, who just had a son who was also a hemophiliac, 2 years old. We had hoped that by the time that she was married, that hemophilia would be gone. It's not, as is AIDS. So I still have hope for the future, for both hemophilia and for AIDS, and I hope that you all do too. We must keep educating and telling the generation today, we can stop this, both hemophilia and AIDS. David, I want you to share your story. David was 16 at the time when most young adults are planning their graduation. David, instead of planning his graduation, we were planning funerals. Our boys died 6 months apart. One on Mother's Day, and one in November. Your story, David. If you want to read what.
So, hi, I'm David. As my mother said, my brothers were hemophiliacs, and they were in their late teens when I came along, and when I was old enough to kind of realize what was going on, I was told, don't worry about it. They've already lived past the age that most hemophiliacs, you know, they beat this, they've got this. They've got this wonderful thing called Factor VIII, and it's doing wonders for them. They're gonna be fine. Jump forward a few years, and I'm being told, your brothers have AIDS, and they're gonna die. And they got it from the Factor VIII. And I'm confused. This is the miracle thing that was keeping them alive, and now you're telling me it killed them? I was confused. I didn't understand. This is when the AIDS epidemic was in its early stages, and nobody understood AIDS and what was going on. I had friends in high school whose parents told them, you can't be David's friend anymore. You can't be anywhere near him. His brothers have AIDS, and it can spread, and you can catch it, and I was confused. You know, I saw my father, this big, strong man, weeping. was confused. What is going on? I've never seen this before. What is happening in my life? I don't understand. It's like nobody understood. Jump forward a few years. You know, my brothers have passed, and we're trying to pick up our lives and get through things. And I get a phone call one day, and I'm told, you know, I was at work, and a representative from a chemical company came in, and they said they have this wonderful product, and you can get AIDS from a toilet seat and from a telephone, and you spray this, and it kills the AIDS virus. And I said, what? You've got to be kidding me. I called that company, and I said, I think it's terrible that you're telling people they can get AIDS from a toilet seat and a telephone. There's enough misunderstanding. You're causing more panic. Well, we have this wonderful product, and you spray it on, and you won't get it. Yes, but the AIDS virus dies in the air in a matter of seconds. You can't get AIDS from a toilet seat and a telephone. Why are you starting more panic? People are already freaked out enough. They didn't want to do anything about it. I called Channel 7, Channel 10, Channel 4, all the news stations. And you know what? They did something about it. I got a call back from that guy who actually the words came out of his mouth, begging me to call their company and say that I apologized and we won't do this anymore. Well, I felt it was a little too late for that, but at least I got something out there, and hopefully they stopped doing that.
Doug's handbook.
Yeah, one of the positive things is, you know, Doug and Scott were very different. Scott went inside, didn't want to talk about it. He figured if he just, you know, put it aside, maybe things would get better. Doug, on the other hand, was completely out and open, wanted to do something about it. And he started this project that ended up, unfortunately, he died before it was finished, but it was the entire pamphlet or booklet that the Miami-Dade public school system decided to use to educate people on AIDS and HIV. That's one of the very positive things that came from Doug. And I remember seeing this book, it was like this big, and I opened it up, and the first thing it said was in loving memory of Doug Siegel, and I'm very proud of that today. I don't know.
That's our story.
That's our story. I'm going to actually go down there because I want to read off of my brother's panel one thing in closing.
If you guys turn around, Doug and Scott's panel is back there in the corner. You made that, right, Teddy?
The family made it, yes. We all made both quotes.
This is real hard for me, my babies. You three are the reasons I hung on, the foundation of my will to live, and the saddest part of knowing that I was going to die. My children, grow up, change the world. Your success is measured by your integrity. Be there for each other. And if you're old enough now, remember that I, your father, loved you, needed you, and was so very proud to have you in my life for as long as I did. I love you, Brett. I love you, Toddy. And I love you, Margot. Love, Daddy.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Teddy.
We've, over the years, we've heard many amazing stories about the magic of the quilt and the power it has to unite the present with the past. I'd like to share one story with you tonight. My good friend, 3 weeks ago, my good friend was featured on the cover of one of the popular publications, Rapid River here in Asheville, and a great photograph, a great interview, and also we had purchased an ad for World AIDS Day in the quilt in that same publication, which happened to feature Steve in a very special moment, gazing at the quilts and taking it all in. And I know Steve wanted to share that publication with his family, and so he sent an email up there and gave them a link to the Rapid River magazine. And it wasn't too much later than that he got an email from his sister-in-law up north, and which he shared with me, which said, wow, I saw your picture on the cover of the magazine and I screamed. She said, then I read the article about you And I screamed again. And then she said, then I saw that the image of you next to the AIDS panel. And I said, it reminded me of the quilt that I made for Jan. And Jan was Steve's partner, who passed in 1993. Steve said, maybe next year we can try to bring the panel here for the next year's event. And I like a little challenge, so I thought, well, maybe we can do it this year. And so with Pam's help too, and we both had all the information I had, and we searched the national quilt on the internet, and after a couple hours and 1,000 quilts, couldn't find it. So I called Steve's sister-in-law again, Susan, and I said, Susan, I need some help. A little more hint, something so we can locate the panel. She said, well, I think I have a photograph. I'm sure I have a photograph, actually, I took of Jan's quilt after I made it. And let me look for that. So 4, 5 days went by, and finally I got a phone call from her, and she said, hey, guess what? I'm holding Jan's quilt in my hand right now. And I was thinking, well, how's that possible? And she said, well, you sent me on this mission to find the photograph, and I went to the first place I thought it might be, and that's where I had sewn Jan's quilt she had a little sewing room, I guess. And she dug down through all these sewing materials and so forth, and saw this box sitting there, and opened it up, and it was Jan's quilt, like brand new. Probably I'm just guessing that because Steve was on and Jan were on the West Coast, and she was on the East Coast, that she was probably waiting for Steve to see it before she sent it off to the Names Project, but somehow thought she did, I think, at some point in time. And so anyway, I had asked her to send it on to me, actually. And she said, I'm losing my story here a little bit, I'm sorry. Asked her to send it to me, and tonight, Jan's quilt was officially inducted to the AIDS Memorial Quilt. After 19 years, Jan is finally home. This quilt is home. Thank you.
I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and the man who was my high school prom date became one of the leads in the Ballet Trocadero de Monte Carlo. If you're familiar with that, it's a troupe of all-male dancers who dance in tutus on point. And the man I knew as William Diatilli became Zamarina Zamarkova, otherwise known as Zammy. And I had seen Zammy dance and had not been in contact with him for quite a while. And one of the years when the panel was, or when the quilt, I should say, was being presented in Atlanta, where I lived at the time, I felt absolutely compelled at a certain point when they were reading the names to go hear the names. I didn't know why then, because it had been going on for hours. And in fact, I found out that Sammy had passed from AIDS because I heard his name read. My mother and sister had wanted to do a panel for Zammy and could not bring themselves to. I have not yet done it, but I still have my prom dress, which my mother had made. I tie-dyed it. I graduated in 1970, as I say, in Los Angeles, so I still have the stole, the shawl from that, and that is what I'm going to use to make Zammy's panel. I have a picture of our prom picture. Zammy showed up in a jacket, in brown socks and sandals, and those will be represented on his panel when I did make it, and hopefully I will be able to do that for next year's induction. Thank you.
My name is Jenny Birch. My father died of AIDS in 1992. I was 16. It was a really challenging time. In the town that I lived in was very conservative, and and it was sort of, the news spread through the town that my dad had AIDS. Just recently, I bought this house. I'm changing tunes here. Just recently, I bought this house here in Asheville, in Weaverville, and the women who owned it before were getting the WinCap newsletter, and I checked the mail one day, and they hadn't forwarded it to their new address, and I saw that the AIDS quilt was coming to Asheville. And I called Pam Seekman and asked her, I said, hey, you know, my dad died in '92. Is there any way you could get his panel here? And she goes, let me check on that, and called me back a few days later and said, guess what? We can get it. And I made his quilt in '92 and dedicated it in '93 in Appleton, Wisconsin. And the last time I saw it was in DC in '96. And so it's exactly 20 years later from when I made it. And it's over here, and it's such a joy to see. My dad would have encouraged me to get up here, and I wanted to honor him right now. And he was a remarkable man. He was vibrant, full of life, and just adventure and excitement, and always the best of the best, and gave me the travel bug. He brought me on vacations to around the world, and introduced me to culture and just beautiful things. So I am so grateful for the experience that I had, and to be here today celebrating him again 20 years later. Thank you.
I kind of stumbled into this room tonight. I hadn't read a newsletter or knowing that this was going to happen, but I wanted to come up and say that I guess 1983, 1984, I was hired to be, my name is Catherine Cartledge, and I was hired as the first chaplain, pastoral caregiver for people living with AIDS at 8 Atlanta, in Atlanta, Georgia. And I went on from there with the vision of my own to create what is now and still is the Atlanta Interfaith AIDS Network. And that was also in the mid to late 80s. And so I have a long history, a decade or more. The first time that the quilt was laid out in Washington, I was honored to be one of the readers of the names. And so I have profound memories and love and compassion for so many people, and the names of so many people, and the images of their quilts in my heart are countless. And, you know, I think you just show up where you're supposed to show up, and I think I just showed up here tonight to say, wow, what a gift all these men and women and babies have been in my life. And if I could just make one quilt for all who have touched me through this HIV, it would just simply say, love.
My brother Mark died of AIDS around 1990. And I took care of him for several years. And it was extremely difficult because nobody understood, including myself, what was wrong. And everybody treated him like he was some sort of horrifying human being. We couldn't take him to the hospitals. And when he get checked out, they'd make him leave. What makes it hard for me is that I eventually gave up. I couldn't take care of him anymore. I just couldn't go. So I moved away. And I moved away from the problem. And he had nobody. And he eventually took his life. I just hope this world will learn to be nicer and kinder to the next horrifying thing that hits us. And I don't know if I can ever forgive myself. But I am so extremely blessed because in my lifetime I have managed to watch events like this and so many other beautiful things happen. And we've learned so much about each other and about the disease. Mark had such an extraordinarily difficult life. For those of you who have forgotten, it was mind-boggling. But anyway, that's my story. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name's Michelle Stinson. And I was first introduced to HIV/AIDS in '86. It was a best friend of my mom's. And the family, because of the stigma and ignorance and everything that was going on back then, they wouldn't let people come around their daughter. Her name was Sarah W. And on bad days, they would keep her locked up in the room and only close people could come around and visit. So I was able to visit with her, with my mom, because they knew that they went to school together and they couldn't be separated. So on her bad days, like being sick and feeble and things, I was able to help take care of her and clean her up, take baths. And I was about 12, 13 years old then. And good days, she was a light. When she came out into the community, she was vibrant, bold, and those are my memories of her. I also got introduced to HIV and AIDS through nursing, which I took up because of being a caregiver all my life in dysfunctional families, etc. So I was never ashamed of people who were different. And I always wanted the cases that people didn't want. And I'm so grateful for not having that fear, that God equipped me with that type of boldness. And my sister, who was my baby sister, Octavia Miller, passed on July of 2005. And I kind of had a little resentment, you know, that God took her from me because we actually didn't grow up together. So I just started finding out that I had another sister and brother. So we were starting to get close-knit, and she ended up dropping quickly because the meds, or the cocktails as they call, wasn't stabilizing in her system to where it was helping her. So nothing was really working. And she also was a witness that helped me to get back in the church. She had 4 children after being diagnosed, and none of them are positive. They're healthy, very educated, and they are advocates. She was an advocate through Metrolina AIDS Project in Charlotte, North Carolina, even up until before she passed away. And I'd like to name Zach, and I can't remember Zach's last name right now because I'm feeling so many feelings and stuff going on. But from here in Asheville, he was one of my beacons when I first came here to Asheville, and he took me under his wing, and he let me know to pick my head up and not let nobody discriminate me or make me feel less than, that I'm a child of God just like everybody else, and there's no weapon formed against us shall prosper. So he kept taking me up under my wing, and I was on drugs then. And he loved me until I could learn to love myself just like WinCap and other people. And I miss him because he was one of my best friends. But I know that now that I'm an advocate and now that I'm speaking out, his words just keep ringing in my sister and everybody. So I'm grateful for all of y'all that are here. And thank y'all so much for being here, and thanks for letting me share.
When I came here tonight, I didn't expect I'd be standing up here talking, but I'm a nurse. And I went into nursing in England in the middle 60s. I came into nursing to take care of people. In the late 70s, I was working in an intensive care unit in Nassau in the Bahamas. That's when I first came to the States. I ended up in the late 70s, early 80s, in the intensive care unit at Jackson Memorial Hospital. We were getting these people, these patients, that were dying of this disease that we didn't know anything about. And they had a list of symptoms that no matter what we did, they were dying. We called it unknown Haitian disease because so many of the patients were Haitians. There was a certain amount of stigma attached to it, even amongst the nurses. We would refuse to take care of these patients for fear of getting it ourselves. To look at us, we looked as if we were taking care of patients from outer space. We would be wearing disposable jumpsuits, masks, gloves. Even our loved ones were afraid of us taking care of these patients. We wouldn't let the patients' visitors in to see them because of spreading the disease. At that time, there was a group of people that were doing research in Miami with mosquitoes from the Everglades, because we thought that well, it wasn't AIDS then, but we thought it was being spread by mosquitoes from the Everglades. My partner at that time was a double master's. He was very intelligent, and I'd come home from work and he'd say to me, "Why are you taking care of these sort of people?" He said, "Get out of there, go and work somewhere else." But I couldn't do that. And yet here I am at the age of 67, many, many, many years later, still healthy, still working as a nurse. So I'm living testament. We didn't get it from the mosquitoes from the Everglades. We don't get it from taking care of these patients. At least now, thank goodness, we have the more modern thinking, the more modern compassion, and the more modern treatment for AIDS patients, which it was finally given a label of in the 80s as AIDS, not unknown Haitian disease. And I just hope that in the future we do have a generation that is without AIDS, because I think the generation nowadays, they don't know the history of the beliefs, the stigma, the prejudice that was put upon this unknown Haitian disease. Thank you.
My friend Bill was one of those patients that no one knew what it was except to say they were sick. And I remember I had friends in Washington where Bill lived, and they believed that Bill was sick, but Bill could not share that part of himself with anyone. He would disappear for a while and he'd be back. When he finally reached out, he was in the hospital with pneumocystis pneumonia, and by the time one of my friends got to the hospital, Bill was in isolation and they wouldn't let anyone in because he was sick and they didn't know what it was. He died before there was even AZT. So I beg you tonight, do not forget.
My name is Sarah Wilcox, and I co-pastor Land of the Sky United Church of Christ. I am blessed to be here in your presence and in the presence of my father's panel tonight. It's a gift every time that I stand in the midst of these beautiful tapestries. They are testimonies of love and light. They have the power to bring us comfort and healing. They have the power to bring us to our knees in grief. and perhaps anger. They have the power to unleash boundless love and gratitude for the gift of having those represented on these panels in our lives. In a world that too often tears us apart, these quilts remind us that we are each part of a woven tapestry, woven together in an intricate pattern that testifies to the difficult challenges of our living, the deep recesses of our pain, and the abundance of light and hope, if only we dare to claim it. I'm always profoundly affected by each one of these panels, and as a faith leader in our community, I always take a deep breath when I see the Episcopal Church panel over here. I imagine it was created in a time when the message was even more radical than it is today. Our church has AIDS, it screams loudly, it boldly proclaims, and depending on who's listening, it might just whisper. It speaks the truth of our brokenness in the church. Too often we speak of the church as though it's a building, but the church is a collection of God's people. And surely it is true that the church is infected. But God did not infect the church. God didn't infect your loved one or my father or the person who passes you on the street or the person who sits next to you in a pew. Time and again, I've borne witness to the truth that God's work is the work of redemption and transformation and possibility. It is not the work of death and destruction. I'm amazed at those who would suggest otherwise, because doing so creates God in our image. What a travesty to image God as the worst of our humanity. Vengeful and intolerant, unmerciful, haphazard and uncaring. God is a broker of light in the face of darkness. God is a giver of hope in moments of despair. God is a place of comfort in the deepest recesses of our grief. God may be present in the places where AIDS is transmitted, in the suffering of those who have it and in those who walk with them, but God has not done this to us. Perhaps you already know that, or perhaps you needed to hear that. But each and every person remembered here on these panels and in the light of these candles is a child of God. And so are you. So perhaps tonight you came with intention because you've lost someone you love. Or maybe you came because you had the time and you support the cause. Or maybe you had no idea how you got here, but you've been moved by the powerful witness that is here in this place. Whatever brought you to this place, I invite you to come forward and to be a broker of the light. Light a candle to remember the ones you love, and in doing so, let us bear witness to the beauty and the power of a light that shines in the darkness. Come and let us remember those we love.
Let all the earth rejoice.
Pam wanted me to say thank you so much to the Sycamore Temple Church of God. Sunday mornings, yeah. Feels like work on Sunday morning, so I feel like I got some church tonight, and I thank you for bringing God here to this place. So I'm standing before you tonight in the shadow of my father's panel. Before I was Sarah Wilcox, I was Sarah Ator, and this is my father's panel, Donald Charles Ator. I can imagine that you all know the work is not done, and one of the things that Pam asked me to send us off with was just about what we might do now. Where are we to go from here? I know that it's controversial, but I'm here as a pastor to say one of the most important things we can be doing right now in a world that's shutting down and closing doors is working to promote comprehensive sexuality education. It is critical. I say that as a pastor of a church, and I say that as a mother of 2 young daughters. Each and every child deserves accurate, good information, and we owe it to them because they become our adults. The other, as we're moving towards our closing, I want to take the time to offer my gratitude to all of those who work at WNCAP and all of those who volunteer and every person who spent countless hours and all the energy to make this incredible display possible. I'm grateful that 22 years after his death, my father's panel serves to remind me of his life and his suffering and my responsibility to those who are still living with HIV and AIDS and those who've already died from this devastating illness. My father died in 1991, a year after he was diagnosed with HIV. It was a decline that was rapid and surprising to a young teenager, and I knew very little about AIDS at the time. I imagine if he had been diagnosed 5 years later, as Pam intimated earlier, the medical developments might have been better, and he might have lived longer. They might have seen him through my college graduation, or perhaps they would have enabled him to walk me down the aisle when I married my husband, or would have allowed him to hold his grandchildren. When I returned to high school after his funeral, I told everyone that my father had died of cancer. I did that for some time, but as I got older, I realized that I had an obligation. It wasn't that I was ashamed of my father, it's that I just didn't have the courage to answer the questions. So as we prepare to leave this sacred space, the other obligation we have, like so many have said and so many have done, is to share our stories. As people whose lives have been affected by the illness, we are called to share the stories of those we love. These phenomenal quilts are only a small piece of the larger story. Who they are and what they meant didn't evaporate when they took their last breath. Their stories and the powerful impact of their lives still matter today. My hope is that you all will feel compelled to tell others. Know that the light of the one you love still impacts this world. The quilts that hang here radically affect those who bear witness to it. So I hope that each one of you will say to your neighbors and your coworkers and your friends in your communities of faith, tell them that AIDS has touched your life and tell them to come here. Let's break down the walls of secrecy and shame. Let's speak courageously for the ones we love and still love, and for the ones who remain still today, who live in the depths of shame and secrecy, the ones who need our voices, who need our love, our care, and our support. That you're here today speaks the truth that the person you have lost is loved and was loved, but every day in our nation and our world, people bear the stigma of this disease, and many do so alone. Let us commit ourselves tonight to being part of the solution, where every person is loved and cherished and cared for because they share the common humanity that links us all. These are tangible responsibilities that we have, but they don't preclude us from volunteering our time and our energy and giving our financial resources. WinCap is an organization that's on the ground doing the work every day to change the lives of people in our community, to change the landscape by which we understand this illness and address it, to change the resources available so that people continue to live with HIV and not die with AIDS. What a gift to live in a community that cares for its people and answers the call for those in need of love and support. Even in the midst of a world and a city and a church that has AIDS, we are blessed. So be certain of that blessing. Even in the darkness of night, let us all be assured that the light shines on. The light lives within us and is shared by us. It never goes out, it always burns. It's a source of warmth that melts cold hearts. It illuminates the path so that we can blaze new trails. It promises that the ones we love are never forgotten. As we move from this place, my prayers are that the spaces of residual grief and sadness that remain in your hearts find healing and wholeness. May the places of rekindled joy erupt into mountains of gratitude and thanksgiving for the lives that have been and continue to be. May the flames of justice continue to be fanned so that a wildfire of action and response moves through our homes, our neighborhoods, our communities of faith, our nation, and the world, so that one day there will be no more AIDS. May it be so, and may it be soon. Go now in peace this night into the darkness where the light still shines.